This is Castle Street in Liverpool city centre, the home of 17 Grade 2 listed buildings, as well as one which has a Grade 1 listing. Liverpool Town Hall was first built in 1754 during the reign of King George II. After a fire, it was rebuilt in 1802, which is the reign of George III. In the last video, we talked about Georgian architecture. So we can't really leave that subject without mentioning this fine example, Liverpool Town Hall. The next era of building fashion is the Victorian era, and that's obviously named after Queen Victoria, and we can find her at the other end of Castle Street. King William IV dies in 1837. He was considered the last of the Georgian kings. So in 1837, Victoria takes over the throne, and she is queen for the next 63 years. Queen Victoria was on the throne from the 20th of June 1837 up to the 22nd of January 1901. That's a span of 63 years and 216 days. It was actually longer than any of her predecessors. This is William Brown Street, and it's named after, strangely enough, a guy called William Brown, and he was a local MP and a philanthropist, which is a person who donates either land or money for the public good. And in 1860 he donated land in this area, which would become what we see today. Let's have a quick look at the buildings which are on William Brown Street. The first one that we've passed is the World Museum Liverpool, which was founded in 1851. The next building is the Picton Reading Room and Hornby Library, which form part of Liverpool Central Library. This building started construction in 1875 and was completed in 1906. Next in the row is the Walker Art Gallery, which houses one of the largest art collections in England outside of London. This building opened in 1877. The last building in the row started life as the County Sessions House. It was a courthouse originally, and these days it looks a little bit neglected, as though it needs some TLC, but it is actually used. It's used as a storage unit for the World Museum. All the buildings we've looked at in William Brown Street are all Grade 2 listed. Now as we move along to Lime Street, this is probably the most famous building in Liverpool, possibly with the exception of the Liver building. This is St George's Hall, built on St George's Place, pretty much opposite Lime Street railway station. Work began on this in around about 1841, and it opened in 1854. This is a Grade 1 listed building, and it was designed by two architects, Harvey Lonsdale Elms and Charles Robert Cockerell. Now earlier on, right at the beginning of the video, I mentioned how many Grade 2 listed buildings there were in Castle Street. And I did say that there was one Grade 1 listed, and that is this building. This is the Bank of England building, and this was designed by Charles Robert Cockerell. In the first video about the Georgian era, we filmed here, Liverpool's Georgian Quarter, and back then we would have been living on the edge of countryside. But not for long, 10 years or so maybe. This was built. Princess Road was built in 1846. The Central Reservation and Princess Avenue would come sometime later. Some of it at this end, the Upper Parliament Street end, does actually look quite Georgian. So this row, although probably built in Victorian times, does look distinctly Georgian. As Queen Victoria's reign started to move along, architecture began to change. Gone was the symmetry and flat roofs of the Georgian era. Now, buildings had steeply pitched roofs, ornate gables, sliding sash or canted bay windows, and some had octagonal or round towers and turrets to draw the eye upwards. Most houses were built either 2 or 3 stories high. Larger buildings like churches were built, and they hark back to the Gothic era, and it was called a Gothic revival. It's a style of masonry building characterised by pointed arches, ribbed vaults, flying buttresses and large stained glass windows. The Gothic era was late 12th to 16th century, or basically what people call the late Middle Ages. The Victorian era gave us open spaces like Prince's Park and Sefton Park. And around Sefton Park you can see some absolutely huge Victorian mansions. The people who used to live on the edge here. Today I think most of them are probably multi-occupancy. Some of them are actually hotels as well. But in their heyday, it would have been where one family lived. Now obviously, not everybody could afford to live in a huge mansion like the ones that surround Sefton Park, or even the houses that line Princess Avenue and Princess Road. They would have been extremely expensive. But Liverpool had an ever-growing population of working-class people. That's us, by the way. And they needed somewhere to live as well. So Liverpool embarked on a building project, building terrace houses, and they built as many as they could, and they built them anywhere they could. Most now have been demolished because they turned into Liverpool's slums. But there are some that still survive, and some are very, very nice. So to have a look at these, we're going to take a trip to Mossley Hill. This is Bridge Road in Mossley Hill, and the pub on the right is called the Rose of Mossley. And just on the opposite side of the road, are two streets which are lined with some very nice Victorian terrace houses. So the first street is called Gordon Place, and it's pretty much as it would have been when it was built. You notice that it's got a central drain. The next street is just a little bit further down, and this one is called Stanley Terrace, and again this is basically what this street would have looked like when it was built. There are still quite a few Victorian terrace properties in Liverpool. These in Woolton Village spring to mind, and there are others in West Derby Village, but many have been flattened by the bulldozer over the years and either replaced with grass spaces or new builds. The Victorians really did start the ball rolling to bring us to where we are today. Many inventions which we take for granted started their lives in the Victorian times. One of them were streets lined with shops, and although some of them still remain in Liverpool, many of them have been demolished. But the things that were invented in Victorian times include the motor car, steam transport such as trains, ships, and also steam tools which helped build some of our large buildings, steam cranes for instance. Football was invented, as were football grounds, and open spaces which we discussed earlier like parks. All these things were pretty unknown to the working person before the Victorian era. The Victorians brought us travel, steam trains which I've just mentioned, would take ordinary people on holiday to the coast, and this gave rise to seaside towns such as Blackpool, Southport and New Brighton. Okay, that's a very quick look at the Victorian era, which I suppose probably warranted a longer video, but time needs to move on, I guess. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch up soon.